everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 17 of 86, and I really liked episode 16. Last week was really good. We got some nice development with Sheen, although I don't know if I would describe it as nice. He seems like he needs some therapy really bad, and is maybe getting too drunk on the battlefield with just drunk on like just sacrificing everything to try to stop Legion and not caring about his own personal well-being, which Frederica kind of points out and is like, hey, this is not cool. But the big question is, who could turn Sheen around? It's not going to be Raiden. It's got to be Lena, right? Because Raiden's been his best friend, and Raiden's trying to Raiden has tried to anchor Sheen and keep him in check, but I think last episode showed that was not working and that Sheen was not listening to Raiden, and Raiden's like, well, what can we do? And so I think it's gonna take our silver-haired girl Lena to step in, but how is that gonna happen? How's that gonna work? Has Lena come in contact with Kiri? That's a big question. It seemed like Kiri was attacking them at the end of the last episode, so the episode ended with the cliffhanger of cliffhangers to not let us know, so of course I have to go ahead and watch. But I know I said I was going to talk about the first volume of the light novel this episode, and as I was editing episode 16, I was telling Discord, be like, hey, I'm going to talk about novel 17, or the first novel in episode 17 after I finish it, and several people were like, maybe you should hold off on that. And I was like, what? No! So I'm only halfway through the first novel. Everyone told me to stop. They're like, there's going to be spoilers. I'm like, I had been told that the first light novel was covering episodes 1 through 9, but apparently there are spoilers for stuff I haven't seen yet in that novel, which is frustrating. And so I guess I'm just going to wait until the end of the season, and then on the side, as I start a new series on the side, do a review of novels 1 through 3. I guess that's what we're going to do. I don't think at this point I'm going to read on with the novels at this point. I don't like to be that reactor that's basing it off traffic of a series, but I just don't know if it's worth my time right now, because there's just not been a lot of, and I've asked there not to be, I've told people I'm not going to read comments, so I'm it's like a self-inflicted thing. I was like, oh, I'm not going to read comments, but then people have kept commenting, and I have actually gone back and looked through a lot of it. Everybody's been really respectful and kind, so thank you. But there's just not, I don't know, if I'm not feeling it, I don't feel like devoting that time and energy to something I'm not feeling. And so I don't know. At this point, I definitely do want to read novels 1 through 3. I'm really excited to read novels 1 through 3 that cover this anime season and talk about those. I'm really excited about that. But beyond that, I don't know. That would leave me like, that's 11 other novels for the series, and if it ever gets, my thing is, if I review the novels, I'm not watching the anime, so it's kind of like, do I just wait and hold off and hope that they create more anime seasons and we can do that? At this point, I'm just not really feeling reading beyond novel 3, but, if everybody on YouTube's like, we'd really love you to read the novels, and they're going to give me, some views and talk about it, then sure. But if it's just going to kind of like be dead water, then I'm like, I'll move on to something else. But that's just kind of how I feel at this point. But I do want to finish this season. I did really like last episode, and I do want to read the first 3 novels to see like what else is not being talked about that I could like kind of go on and talk with you all. But I do want to make note, K.A. Here, this really got my goat, because K.A. is a YouTube commenter that's really nice and comments on almost all of my videos, which is super time consuming for them and very kind. And they like to give voice actor information, which I really appreciate. And they said that Marcel's voice actor also played Kusakabe in Stars Align, which I've watched. They play Ataya in Given, which I really like. And then Winsel's voice actress plays Law's sister in One Piece. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. But here's the thing. Marcel, their name, first we had Bernholt, which is kind of a derivative of Berthold from Attack on Titan. And I know what you're all going to say. You're like, well, that's not necessarily true. Bernholt is a German name. It's like saying a name John is derivative for a certain anime. And I understand that. But this character's name is Erwin Marcel. Erwin Marcel. Like you picked 2 specific characters from Attack on Titan that are pretty prominent, and your character's name are those. That's like, It's like saying, oh, this is Armin Light, or saying, oh, this is Yuki Victor, or like something like this. You're like, wait, what? So, or this is Yuki Yagami. And I'm like, that's interesting. So I'm not saying that the author directly took Erwin and Marcel, two prominent characters in Attack on Titan. I'm not saying that they derived their names and just made them their own. I'm not saying that. They're common German names. Maybe they just randomly saw them and that's what they went with. It seems on the nose to me, but again, I'm making a grand assumption that is probably not true. So there was I just found it really amusing. They should have called him Flock Marcel based on their personality, but whatever. And then the other thing was, some people were commenting about Sheen and how the light novel does talk about his inner monologue. And I was like, yes, from what I've read from the first light novel, you do get a lot more of Sheen's inner monologue, which I appreciate. But here's my thing. They were like, the comment that I saw, they were like, oh, well, the reason why, Sheen's character is so mysterious is because a lot of his dialogue in the novel is on inner monologue. And I'm like, that's not a reason or an excuse, because I don't know if you've watched Death Note, 90% of that damn anime, as far as Light's dialogue, is internal monologue. I'm like, but it's an anime. You can do whatever you want with it. So if you want to have internal monologues, you just put them in. Like, characters in other series have internal monologues. It doesn't take away from the show. It doesn't make it any less realistic. It will help your character development and your audience relate to your character, unless your goal is to make them mysterious, which is fine. I'm all about a main character that's mysterious. It's just hard to connect with them sometimes. Now, some people in the Discord have instantly connected to Sheen, and they're like, oh, they're the reason I kept watching the show is because of Sheen. And that's really cool to me. I'm like, that's really neat. For me personally, it's just, that's not the type of character I truly connect with as far as protagonists go. Like, if you have a side character that's mysterious, oh, sure. But if they're your main character that you're supposed to follow from start to finish, you do, for me, I kind of want more, but I understand that. But I am glad with the light novel and what I've read so far that we do get more internal monologue with Sheen. I'm really excited to get more into that. The one thing that was kind of just weird with the light novel, and not weird, it's just, I don't want to say hokey. I don't want to make fun of light novel. I'm only like halfway through it, the first one, but like every person in the story, every hair color is a nationality in that series, which is a fine world building tool. If you want to make every hair color, every distinct hair color a nationality, that's a world building choice. That's fine. That's cool. Some of the names are just a little like Rubinio or Onyx or like Oretta. Again, I think I said it in the reaction or the discussion last episode. It's just like, it sounded a little bit like the Triton daughters from Little Mermaid. Aurelia, Alina, Aurora. Like, they're just all like the same alliteration. It could have been workshopped a little bit. I'm just saying. The editor could have workshopped those translations just a wee bit, so that they weren't, I don't know. It's hard to describe it. They could have been better. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to say it's childish or hokey because it's not, but I just was reading them going, these are really tedious names that I have to remember for every nationality. And they're just kind of, I don't know. They're a little bit on the nose. I guess on the nose is the best way to describe it. But I do like the light novel so far. I wish I could read more of it, but I've been told I can't. So... But I do really like the internal monologues. I thought that there were a couple parts in the first half that give a little bit of extra context. Just not anything worth really mentioning, but just explaining the scene more. That was really nice. So I do like the light novel so far. I am excited to finish the first half of the first light novel and then read the other two and then talk to you all about that when the season is over. That'll probably be like a side video that I'll be doing, but I'm because then I'll have to take time to actually read the light novels after the season is over. So it's going to take me a little bit, but I will do a video on that and just see where it goes, right? If people are clamoring for me to read the light novels, but that is a big endeavor and I do so much on this channel that it will take some time and to do those. But if people aren't really going to be interested, then I'm just going to move on and kind of wait till the anime comes out for season 2 to go back to 86 eventually. So we'll see what happens, right? So yeah, we'll see what happens. But in any case, I have talked for way too long. I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. I'm excited to see what happens this episode. I hope y'all are too. Hopefully I won't have to rant about any uncles, but no promises. So we're going to start episode 17 of 86, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Well, that was an episode. It felt like such a mixed bag episode. There are parts of this episode I really, really liked. And then there are parts that's kind of my thing with 86. And I'm very happy that there have been some people on YouTube be like, hey, we're happy that you're being critical of this show. Because yeah, I'm going to be honest about any show that I watch. If there are parts of it that feel weird or parts of it that I'm like, this is what I think about it, I'm going to say that. I'm not going to just sit here and praise a show just to make the fandom happy. I mean, obviously, if this show were so bad that it was like not worth watching, I wouldn't watch it. But I can honestly say I've never had a show on this channel that's been at that level, which is a good thing. And honestly, there's a lot about 86 I really like. There were moments in this episode that I was like, yes, this is exactly what I love about anime. This is what I love about shows like this. But there's something about this series that definitely it clicks wrong with me, and I notice it, and it's distracting, and I'm like, why? But why? It feels like the show, like, to me, it teeters on the edge of doing some really great things, but it just misses the mark, or it falls short of it, and I'm like, I want to, like, elevate it to the next level, but I don't know how to do that, so I'm not the one that created this show, so clearly I'm not the one to answer that question, but we'll talk about it, and maybe I definitely have, there are moments that I'm like, but what if you did this and it could have been better to me? But obviously there's a lot of people that really love this show. So to them, you don't have to change a thing. And that's awesome. I respect, right? Totally respect. If you think this is the best show on the planet, respect. Because there's some shows that I like that people are like, that show? I'm like, yes, that show, right? Mm-hmm. It's a genre thing too, but there are some things in this episode that are really, really well done. And this show also focuses on things that I don't care about at all. So we'll talk about that. We need to go through that, and I'm going to tell y'all what I mean by it. But let's go ahead. This episode went by really quickly. Very quickly. But we have our elusive suicide final mission. If this feels like deja vu, that's because it literally is. We're going to talk about the parallels and that we're doing here. So we have our suicide mission that we will talk about here very shortly. We're going to put it up there in big, bold words. Okay, though, the one thing I will say, if you told me this, I would not argue you. If you said that 86 has one of the best soundtracks and scores of an anime in recent years, I would absolutely agree with you because it does. Yeah, Sawano's score, very similar to like Attack on Titan. Sawano's score is just, he also does the score for Seraph of the End, which is amazing. I love Seraph of the End. Does it deserve to have a score by Sawano? You could argue that. I do. I think it does. I think that it elevates it a lot, right? I do like Seraph of the End. Is it my favorite anime? No, but it's a fun time. It's a fun show. It doesn't take itself too seriously. I think that's why a lot of anime doesn't take itself too seriously, and that makes me enjoy it more. I think this show sometimes takes itself very seriously, and I'm like, you need to bump down a peg. But I love the score of this series. This opening sequence. Oh, the music, the bombastic, like the do 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 do, like all that, like just rounding up. Oh, that like got my blood pumping. And what this show does, and it's so frustrating to me sometimes, is that it will be doing something really good. It will do something fantastic and amazing, and I'm like, keep it up, show. And then it does one little corny thing that you're like, oh, what the fudge you doing? So this opening sequence was amazing. Like the build up, the Legion is coming through San Magnolia. We're going back through the streets that we saw in the very beginning with the cars and the tram. I like the fact they go back to the tram and the public transportation. I like that because it's kind of like you have the rail car, that goes through and transports the people. And from the very first episode, it creates this sense of camaraderie and community, having that train car go through. And you can tell that all the Alba people all believe in this sense of community. It just happens to exclude everyone else, right? But that tram was in the very first episode, and it was really like a symbol of showing how San Magnolia is as a collective, all very like-minded. And here we cut the first thing we see is that tram being derailed. Like that sense of community is derailed. That sense of this pristine utopia is being destroyed by Legion. And I was like, I honestly did not see this coming like this, right? I wondered, I talked about earlier on in the series, I was like, okay, well, maybe Legion is going to like invade San Magnolia, but you kind of don't think it's going to happen because, usually in some anime, it just never happens. It's like, oh, that threat's out there, but our heroes find a way to stop it. No, they come into San Magnolia, right? And you don't exactly expect it to happen like this, so it's really cool. And I like the just sense of dread that this scene invokes, right? It's so well done. And just seeing everything fire, seeing like all the beautiful statues destroyed, everything, seeing like it's kind of starting to imitate when you see the mannequins through the shop window that's been destroyed. It feels like the episode, which one is it? Episode 10, where they go through Geod and you see the remnants, like the episode where they go to the zoo and you see the remnants of the city. It was reminding me of that. I'm like, okay, San Magnolia is going to become a husk of itself, like Geod was, right? Which does beg the question. We don't really get to see what happened to the people of San Magnolia. We see a lot of them dead. We see Lena's bedroom, except for I like the one thing in her bedroom that remains is the box with all the names. Funny that, like, the 86 are the one that remains. I like it. I think that's fine. We don't know what's going to happen to them. It would be very interesting to see if San Magnolia's people become refugees and suddenly try to get into other countries, and the other countries are like, F no, and like turn them away. We'll talk about that. Here in a little bit, but that would be interesting to see if it happens. But yeah, this series is really good. This episode and scene. And then this stupid sign pops up that says 86, stay away. And it's so corny. It's so cheesy. It's like, again, I feel like this show, not that it does get preachy sometimes, but it's just like things that we've had hammered so hard in our system as far as theme. We know that San Magnolia doesn't want the 86. We that's like such a basic knowledge at this point in the series. And just that, like being the focal point, that sign that says 86, stay away. And then you see the Alban people running. It's just kind of B-movie. It's almost cheesy to the point where it's B-movie. And I was like, ah. I was loving this scene. I think if you took away that graffitied sign with the most obvious graffiti possible, and the weirdest part is that it's in the middle of town. That confused me too, because I was like, wait a minute. What I was thinking of is if you showed the overpass like at the bridge, because there's a bridge that connects District 86 to the Grand Mur. You have the Grand Mur, and you have like this little bridge area that connects the Grand Mur and the District 86 to District 85 or whatever. It's like it connects the two worlds. If you had like an overpass or a billboard with that graffiti on it that said 86 stay away, and you saw that sign right before the one 86 member blew up the bridge, that would have been perfect. That would have been like, oh, okay. It still would have been corny, but it would have logically made sense in the realm of the world building. But here, in this pristine, beautiful San Magnolia Republic downtown square, why the hell would there be a sign spray painted 86 stay away? There are no 86 there. That's the point. And they all believe that, so why do you have to spray paint it? So it's just, animation decisions like that don't make sense. And so then it takes you out of the moment, and then you start to question it and criticize it, and then you're like, but why did you do that? And so it takes away from a very good scene. And right off the bat, I was like, oh, 86, you were so close to having a perfect scene in your opening, but then you included that little like bit of symbolism that makes no sense whatsoever. And so I'm like, why did you do that? And I was immediately taken out of the moment. But that's the only thing. I'm like, show, you don't have to hold our hands and explain thematic elements we already know. So yeah. So then we see them all running, Legion's coming in. This part was badass, though. I loved Lena's hand swooping over. And then we see her being like, yes, her just orchestrating this battle. Sheen is, in fact, our Grim Reaper. But he has got a lot of issues. A lot of issues. We're going to put Sheen up here, right? We're going to put Sheen, and we're going to put Lena. Our girl Lena has grown a lot over the course of this series, which I'm very proud of Lena. I like how her character has grown and developed and how she is fearless. She is fearless. She stands I'm going to put stands up and resolved. Because she's resolved in her feelings, but also she has this sense of justice and also has this sense of purpose, right? And I think that's really important that she's, she doesn't like San Magnolia's people and how they treat the 86. She doesn't like it at all. She thinks it's a big, giant flaw. But at the end of the day, she's like, am I going to just sit here and die? No. It's kind of like the 86's resolve. They're like, yeah, this situation sucks, but are we going to sit here and let Legion kill us without fighting back despite the hardships around us? No. So I kind of like how she's become integrated into it. And now, she had talked about earlier on in the series that she wanted to fight on the battlefield with the 86. And at the beginning of the series, I thought she was going to get on the battlefield with Sheen and the others. And that may still happen. We still got several episodes left. I think it's going to happen by the end, that she's going to show up. But I expected her at this point or later to show up with Sheen and the others on the battlefield, but I didn't expect this to happen first, where she was actually fighting with the other 86, like Cyclops and the others. It'll be interesting to see if Cyclops ends up dying and she has to she mourns them or whatever, but I'm going to be curious to see what she ends up doing. But I love that she's there fighting back, and it's all kind of very fast paced, so you're not exactly sure what's happening, but Lena's not dead. No way. Now Annette and the others, I don't know. I mean, the one question we could have is, she's out there. Now, here's the thing. Okay, I was going to question, I'm like, is she on the full battle lines? But no, she's a little bit away from the front lines where she's not immediately in danger and all the equipment's not immediately in danger. It shows them and Annette's helping her, make sure that the other 86 know what's going on in the Legion coming. I love it. I love the idea that they're on the front lines, but they're integrating the technology they have with the Para-Raid with the 86. Girl, yes. And I love that there's Albans there that are helping her, right? That's one thing. Only thing I'm going to say is her uncle could have been out there helping her as a higher ranked official. Instead, these literal 18-year-olds are, who says Gen Z isn't doing their job, right? What a boomer. Although he's probably Gen X by comparison. But yeah, I was like, come on, uncle, you got all these little kids helping her out and you're just doing what? He's being noble and keeping the higher ups from finding out and stopping them. Sure. That's all I'll say about him this episode. Hate him. But yeah, I love that she's I love Lena, and we see her be worried for everyone and seeing the fire and everything start to come to them, and Annette and this random curly haired guy, and then we see a Legion, and it's her Para-Raid with all of them. Okay, I wondered if it was the Legion for a second because it's blue, like the light there, which is probably of no coincidence. But then, yeah, her yelling at all of them. I'm like, girl is a leader. And that's kind of the interesting thing is the difference between her and Sheen is that and not to say Sheen isn't a leader, but I'm going to say we're going to put all by her name. Her thing is all about, and we're going to put it here, it's all about survival. It's all about, hey, let's live to see another day. Let's live to see the other side of this war and to save ourselves and our friends and comrades. Let's live to see another day. And we're going to talk about that in comparison to Sheen here in a little bit. But I love that about Lena. I think Lena's character is amazing. I really have missed her character. I'm kind of on board with everybody else. We haven't seen her character or really talked with her character in 4 or 5 episodes. And I'm like, come on, girl, where you been? But, okay. So, surprising no one, our 5 characters are perfectly fine. I wondered for a second when Sheen covered her eyes if maybe Anju had died or Theo had been injured, but no, they're fine. they're going to need all the help they can get to stop this final suicide mission, right? So August 27th. So this episode takes place over the span of 5 days, pretty sure, over the span of almost a week. I do think it is really good that they tried to like block Frederica's vision so she couldn't see. But I'm like, and I do like the visual of him covering up one of her eyes. And if you look in that frame, it's like 2 minutes and 41 seconds into it. You see Sheen's one eye and you see her other eye. And in the shot, looks really good, right? Looks really good. I do like that. I like that little artistic kind of expression there. And then somebody's like, my arm! I'm waiting for like the SpongeBob, my leg! And then she sees there's dead people everywhere and body parts. Miraculously, the 586 are perfectly fine. I do like that the table and stuff got in the way there, but there's like somebody's random boot, their leg, just hanging out there. We don't get to see Raiden or Karina or Theo in this moment, but we do see Anju come and get Frederica from Sheen, right? We do get to see that. And she's like, Kiri did this. He led the attack. And she's like, you're not going to do this, right? Again, I have no clue how old Frederica is. They kind of have, it's very interesting. Like the very beginning of us meeting Frederica, she seemed like she was hiding how old she was and that she was this mysteriously like 40-year-old woman that looks like she's 10. But ever since we've come to the base, suddenly she is a child and they're just like, no, she's a kid. And so I'm like, okay, that was a choice. But if we're going to stick with it, I'm not going to question it. But sure. But I am glad Frederica comes out and just says it. I'm glad she just comes out and says, hey, Kiri, you're exhibiting a lot of behaviors that are similar to this guy that's just about killed us because he gave himself over to Legion. You're not going to end up like that, right? like I'm glad Frederica is asking Sheen this because, you know, Sheen's been doing some questionable things that would make you think that he doesn't care whether he becomes Legion or not in the long run. And so she's just like, hey, you're not planning on becoming like this, right? So I'm going to put Frederica down here. Frederica, and just say that, you know, she does not want Kiri to equal Sheen by the end of this. And I'm like, you know, if Lena has anything to say about it, that's not going to happen. And there was a really good moment with Sheen in this episode where he kind of started to realize, oh, I do have somebody I'm living for. But we'll talk about that as we go through this. So yeah, she's like, you're not going to end up like Kiri, right? One thing I really like about this scene, one kind of symbolic thing that they do artistically in anime that I really like is when a character says something but they don't really mean it, their mouth is covered by something, whether it's their hair or whether it's like you just see their eyes or something like that. It's a really cool anime effect they do. It's kind of cliche, but I like it. And that's where they just cover up the mouth. So they'll say one thing, but it almost is representative of it doesn't mean that. So I'm going to be curious if the light novel, what they do to emphasize this, because the way that he says, like he's looking, you can see his mouth when he's like thinking about it. And then when he turns to face the table he's next to and says, yeah, his mouth is covered. So it almost makes it feel like he's saying something, but he's not truly believing what he's saying. My guess is if we get to this point in the novel, we're going to get an inner monologue with Sheen that tells us, I'm saying this one thing, but I'm not meaning what I'm saying. That's going to be my interpretation of it, but we'll see when we get to that. But yeah, so breaking news. The first barrage hit the 8th Mechanized Forward Operating Base, FOB 14. Okay, there is a lot of information thrown at us in a short amount of time. And so I don't know if all of it's worth writing down on Whiteboard Coon, but so the base 14... get this right here. We have base 14, base 13, and then Marcel and the other dudes, they're in the hospital wing looking shooketh. 13 was struck, and then 15 hours later, FOB 28 and 30 were struck. So we get this idea that there's a 15-hour window between the Mondos or whatever they're called. We're going to talk about that in a second, get their name here, between them reloading, right? So we do see the sister watching the news, this little girl watching the news and being obsessed because now she's lost her brother and seeing like the picture of him. Yeah. And then she has she has the white lily in the vase, kind of like what Lena had to celebrate, to like memorialize the fallen. This monitor the president has in front of him is freaking huge. It's like enormous. Yep. So we have the next day, them trying to figure out what is 4 regiments stationed at those bases. 20,000 people lost. So damn. So yeah, you see on the screen there's 4 bases hit in a short amount of time. There's 100% damage, and there was like nearly 5,000 killed at every single base. That's a problem. At first it says like 4,900, 4,800, 4,800, 4,200. I'm like, that doesn't equal 20,000. But then there's like an other, which could be like along the way die, and that equals the 20,000. So it's a big problem to lose that many troops in, in 4 random attacks. That's a lot of people died. They were wiped out. I do appreciate the president just sitting there looking like, dear God, like this is really bad. And so my thing was, we talk about the idea here that they have this long range artillery, right? The long range artillery that the 86 told them about, and they didn't believe them. Surprising no one. But I think there is an interesting distinction here, because San Magnolia, I don't think, I was really mad because Lena never told them about this, and we're kind of like, hey, but after the uncle's whole deal, I was like, well, hell, they probably were never going to believe them. So that's a thing. But I do think it's interesting to have that distinction where San Magnolia, because they never got to experience the effects of that long-range artillery, they probably were never going to believe it. And we're like, oh, well, the 86 will deal with it. And here you have Jihad, the Federacy, being like, yeah, they wiped out 20,000 of us in 4 attacks. We need to take this seriously. So I do like the contrast of that, and showing that, yeah, this is problematic. And it's this new type of legion. My thing is, and my question about all of this is Morpho. That's what we're going to call them, the Morphos. It's Morbin time. It's Morphin time. That's more Power Rangers. My question is, and I don't want an answer to this, but I was under the assumption that the legion that exists in this world are all the same legion that existed 9 years ago, when they all kind of went rogue from the old Jihad and destroyed everything, and now they're just on this continuous loop cycle. And it does make sense that they restock their brains with brains from the 86, and those re-hardwired brains are helping them evolve and develop military tactics, which we'll talk about in a second. That part all makes sense. Like the legion developing strategies over time because of the brains they've inherited, that part makes sense, and I get that. But the Morphos, did they already exist before the AI took over the Legion and separated itself from Jihad? How do they make them? Who's making these Legion? The Legion are all just weapons. How can they make new weapons? I'm like, wait a minute. How can they? I understand the Legion evolving in terms of strategy, and in terms of extending their shelf life because of inheriting the brains. That part makes sense. But I'm like, who's making the Morphos unless they already existed? And if they already existed, where were they? Why didn't the Federacy know about them? That part doesn't make sense unless there is an actual group of people still working with the Legion, but I don't think that there is. So I'm like, how do weapons make weapons? Unless the only thing I can think of is if the Morpho always existed and they just hadn't been used yet, but then how did they turn on? How did they gain consciousness? Shouldn't their term life have already expired if they've not had new brains? How did the Legion get them new brains? What? So that part doesn't make sense to me, because it seems like the Legion army is all fully automated AI, but how do they make their own new robots? I don't understand that. That part does not make sense to me. And maybe the light novel will give us more answers, but that part's weird. I feel like there's kind of a plot hole or loophole there, being like, why didn't the Federacy know about these? Maybe they did, and these are just the ones that, because this Confederacy is the one that kind of did a coup over the family, the royal family. So maybe the royal family knew about this and they just didn't tell them. I don't know. That seems like a weird plot point that I'm like, I don't think guns can make guns. They don't have opposable thumbs, and I don't think they can work factories. So I don't understand that, but whatever. The other part that I personally am not interested in is, I know some people that are probably into like the calibers, the initial velocity, the effective range, the firearm, all that stuff, like the weaponry in war movies. I'm sure some people like get off on that and they like really like that. I'm not one of those people. I could care less. So I'm like, it's fine. Like all this stuff feels like another language to me. And I'm like, yes, it's an 800 millimeter caliber tank anti-rifle. Yes. Okay. It's cool. It's just not something that I'm like, okay, nice. This would be impossible for normal canon. We think it's a railgun, which matches up with what the president remembered them saying from their reports. It's most likely a railgun. Yes. We do get the ages of all of them listed there. And we do have, okay, so their race is listed on that. So this is what I was talking about in the intro. Like Sheen is a pyrope and onyx, right? That's his hair color is onyx, so that's one ethnicity, and then pyrope is the other one. Ison is the ethnicity of Raiden, and then which it says his hair color is iron. What? I feel like it's green. I feel like that's a weird color choice. And then Theo is a jade, right? And then we have Anju down there, and we don't see her, but hers is like it was like something else. I remember it from the novel. But yeah. So we don't have their birthdays under there. We just have their height and weight and their age. They're all 16, which, they are kids, right? They are very much children. And Sheen is very much a kid that needs some therapy. I've got something stuck in my nose. Anyway. Might have swallowed a bug. But yeah. So they think that there's 15 hours between the second and third strikes replacing the barrel. It takes that long to repair it and replace it. And during that time, the Western Front's forces loaded up every cruise missile they had and fired back on it, but it didn't destroy them. So then we have some new people come onto the scene. We have Roa Gracia's Crown Prince Zafar Idinarakov, right? So we'll put him over here. We have old Zafar, and he's with Goa. He looks like Chigiri from Blue Lock, and he sounds like Zarbon from Dragon Ball Z Abridged. We will definitely not be attacking the Sun Magnolia. That's a terrible impersonation, but I swear he sounds like him. So we have this, and I'm glad they're okay. They have a nice little purple flag there, looking really mighty fine there. I wonder if Karina's from there because her has the red hair too. Then we have the Alliance of Wald. And we have Belle Aegis, who's the Alliance of Wald. And her hair is like mixed colored. So she seems like she's maybe a mixture of races there or ethnicities. So we have Belle Aegis from Wald, this older lady there. And they're talking about, and they kind of do the thing where the two countries seem like they don't get along or have anything in common, and then they finish each other's sandwiches, and it's like, oh, look at them, they do get along, right? And so they're talking about like taking care of the Morpho and how they just don't have the means to do it, and they're kind of relying on the Federacy to get this done. And they're like, well, you spent quite a lot on this, so... And they're like, well, we're all going to do this joint operation. There's so much passive aggressiveness in this moment. It's kind of hilarious. And they're like, well, we need to bind these two nations together. And everybody's just kind of like tensely looking at one another, being like, yeah, this will work. So the three countries are all deciding they need to take out the Morphos. They need to make sure they get rid of them because the Morphos could destroy all of them. They're a major threat. We need to get out of them immediately. And they're like, so the Legion's weakness, this is what I want to get at. The Legion's weakness is they rely on their numbers and strength, but they are tactically simple. Yeah, it's kind of like a zombie apocalypse, right? The zombies aren't necessarily smart, and they're not, combat technicality savvy, but there's so many of them, and they're hard to just destroy that's why they kind of just overwhelm whatever they're up against. They just keep like like a battering ram. They're kind of like, they remind me of the orcs in Lord of the Rings. Are the orcs tactically advanced? No. Are there a shit ton of them and they just keep coming at you? Yes. And eventually it's just like they keep just piling against a wall until it falls down, right? So it's the Legion's kind of like the orcs. It's just a lot. And they just will keep on coming without pause while everybody else is trying to rest up and save their strength. The Legion doesn't care. They don't need to do that. They're tactically simple. But the large offensive, I like this one lady. She's like, the large offensive could have been just an attempt to lure us to the front lines. I like she's trying to take that into account, being like, this could all be a big trap, right? And then they're like, it makes their head hurt. And that's where they're both like, oh, we have something in common? What? Yeah, it's just a big problem. They're all realizing that they need to take out the Morphos. And so they're like, anyway, no, judging on their last firing position, they're likely a train-based weapon that use a railway network. I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh, that makes sense. They're just on a railway and they jam communications using the little moths that they got. And that's how they are able to kind of like just go on a circuit. So that all made sense. I was like, that was cool. I like that explanation. And so then they talk about the capitals, right, of where they could be. And it all just looks like this weird spider, right? So they're like, Capella, like every one of our nation's capitals are within firing range. So we have Capella of Wald is there. We have Arx Steely of Roa Gracia. Arx Steely, right? We've got that. And then we had Sankt Jedder of the Republic of Geod. Of Sankt Jedder. And did they give us anything with San Magnolia? No. We get nothing with San Magnolia. And their current location is the train terminal in Kreuzbeck City. Okay. So, and they're going to be there for 8 weeks. So Kreuzbeck is where they're at. Kreuzbeck City for 8 weeks. And that seems like a long time. You're like, oh, 2 months. We've got plenty of time. But one, I like that Theo points out, one, this is all just speculation that they're going to wait without attacking us. We don't know if that's true or not. That's just analyst speculation, which has been wrong before. And two, 8 weeks is honestly less time than you think when you're dealing with 4 sites that sustain such heavy damage, casualties, picking up the pieces. You've had weaponry and artillery destroyed. Like trying to regroup and get this mission together in 8 weeks is a lot harder than it sounds. And so, yeah, that's kind of terrifying. I'm glad that they give us that realistic amount of time. It's not just like in 3 days they're going to come back, because then they'd be screwed. But 8 weeks is still not a lot of time. I also think 8 weeks is a smart choice narratively, because that will give Lena plenty of time to get her shit together if she's coming over to find them. So we'll see, right? We'll see. But yeah, for the repairs to become combat capable again. If we can't find a countermeasure by them, then we're screwed, basically. And the president's like, well, son of a bitch, what countermeasures do we know will work? So then we have this dark-haired guy, which honestly, he looks kind of like Sheen and Kiri. He looks like he could be related to them. He's clearly an Onyx, if we're going by their hair colors being their nationalities. He's an Onyx, so surely he's related to them. That is the one weird thing. Like, I'm like, the nationalities being hair colors, I'm like, what if there are shades? What if there are, like, genetics are weird, so how do we figure that out? Or the eye and hair color, it's a weird thing. But it's a weird thing for a nationality to be just a hair color, because then genetics get weird. So what if your hair colors change? I mean, like, here's what's weird to me about the hair colors being nationalities, and I think this is what I was trying to say in the intro and I could not articulate it. My aunt and her husband both have black hair and dark brown eyes. Their 2 children are blonde hair and blue-eyed. That's genetics, right? It's recessive genes, dominant genes. So I don't know if it's this, I don't know if the world building of having nationalities based on hair colors makes total sense, because genetics don't work that way. Especially if you have people that have mixed blood in this series like you do, if you're trying to make this a realistic series, then realistically hair colors you can get an off gene that like throws everything off. And that's being super nitpicky, but I was just like, oh, it just weirds me out. Like hair colors being nationalities it's not fickle, but it's something weird. I don't know. It's just an odd choice. It's a simple choice. It's like simple in its construction, but it doesn't feel sophisticated enough for what the story wants to be. Anyway, so we have this guy. And he's like, well, what do we do? I do like the bespectacled man, the guy with the red hair and the glasses. His character design's awesome. I love him. He's like, our anti-air guns are not fast enough to shoot down the Morphos. We don't have enough to try it. So that's not going to be good enough. And so like we're bringing in more cruise missiles from other war zones, but the Legion is jamming them so we can't guide them. And so we see Roa Gracia where they're getting some missiles from and things like that. And they're like, but the Legion won't let us guide them, so that's a problem. They're kind of useless. And they're slow, which means they can be shot out of the sky easily. So that's a problem. The Morpho has a powerful AA weaponry, which is another airstrike likely would not work any better. So without air superiority, an air-to-surface attack is going to be very difficult. So, and yet it lies far outside of our artillery range. So we'll have to eliminate directly using ground troops, which seems like a very bad idea. And they all just kind of look at him like, this is, like all of them look around. They're like, oh, so we have to put people on the ground to go up against these Morphos. Ooh, that seems like a bad idea. Why would we want to do that? Why, we want to put more of our civilians in danger. Why would we want to do that? If only we had a scapegoat. If only. I will make note, there are no women in this boardroom. None at all. And there are none except for Winsel in the other boardrooms. And that seems like a minor detail. If you are a person in the fandom who's not a woman, you may be like, well, who cares? And I'm like, I will make note. There were women all throughout San Magnolia in the ranks of their military. Quite frequently, there's lots of ladies in the military in San Magnolia. I'm not saying that reflects anything on their viewpoints because their viewpoints are garbage. But if we're talking about having, gender representation in the military, San Magnolia had a lot of ladies. I want to look in the mess hall and see if there's a lot of women in there. There's been a couple, but as far as the higher up boardrooms, and of course, San Magnolia, Lena may have been the only woman that was high up in the ranks. There might have been a sausage fest there too, but I just feel like, I don't know if this story is written by a man or a woman, but I'd be like, it'd be cool if Witzel wasn't the only woman in the higher up position because she gets dogged on a lot in this story so far. They're like, silly lady, just go back to your science lab. And I'm like, But yeah, it's a little frustrating. And they're like, an all-out offensive by every soldier in the Western Theater into Legion-held territory, that would be suicide. Like, it's just swarming with Legion. Why would we want to do that? And so they kind of talk about how, even if we bring in all of our available resources, that we lost 26% on that front in the last attack. Pulling troops from the other battle lines isn't an option. So we'll have to do with what we have here. And so we brought down the numbers of Legion, and so they basically kind of go in a roundabout way to saying, like, in 2 months, there's going to be more and more casualties. It would be a handy thing to have, the power to predict destruction, but nothing else. Whoever we choose is going to die. It's a suicide mission. And they're said that's why we should choose those who are most likely to succeed and least likely to be missed. Just like the Republic. So yeah, basically, we're going to choose the 86 for the suicide mission. Why? Because we don't care if they die. The people won't care if they die. Which is so interesting because when they first showed up at the Federacy, there was all those like protests and rallies and stuff where everybody was like, free the 86 and we love the 86. But the military here is saying, oh, that's just a front. They don't care. If they die, who cares? And I'm like, aha. So, I mean, I've thought from the beginning that it seemed very too good to be true that the Federacy was just like, oh, we're going to welcome you guys with open arms and all this. And there is a major difference in the fact that, on the surface and on paper, it seems like if the 86 live past this battle, which none of those military guys think they will, but if they live past this battle, like Winslow talks about, you need to quit the military and go back and live in the city amongst the other civilians. So on paper, it seems as if they would be able to do that. And in the city, when they were there, like at episode 13, it showed them like actually integrated into the society and living there fine. So that is different than San Magnolia. It's a weird turn at this point in the series for all the military to be like, we actually hate the 86 and we don't like any of them. We're exactly like San Magnolia. But I'm like, but the city and the people there didn't seem to be that way. So was that a lie? Or is this just the military culture that's like San Magnolia? So that part's interesting to me, that they're trying to make this statement that the Federacy is doing the exact same thing that San Magnolia did, but then you have that juxtaposed with how the city and the people there seem to get along perfectly fine with the 86. So I don't exactly know what that's trying to say. I'm glad there is that distinction, but in the military aspect here, they're making the same decisions that San Magnolia did. San Magnolia didn't want to send their own troops out there, so they're like, oh, we're going to scapegoat all of these like refugees and all of these immigrants and all these people that aren't Albans, like we pure-blooded people who were here first. Because it does say in the novel that the Albans were like native to that land. However, the Republic here is kind of doing the exact same thing, but they're almost hiding it behind this guise of, well, but our people in our city like you. It's not like San Magnolia, but it kind of is. So, So anyway, so this guy that looks kind of like Sheen, he looks like Bishonen BL Sheen. He looks like the guy there with the kind of like curly wavy black hair. He looks like if Sheen was in a 90s BL. That's what he is. And then we immediately cut to the 586, which, if you notice, as always, Sheen is not near Raiden and Theo. He's off by himself, which is problematic. So yeah. And so then he's like, oh, sorry, I've read the reports. You guys aren't even afraid of death. And they're like, well, that's all we've grown up knowing. And so he's like, you guys don't have to do anything reckless. The Federacy isn't like the Republic, but you've just shown you are in terms of this. Nobody here is replaceable, for better or for worse. And then they all kind of like look back at him as he walks away, especially Raiden. I like that shot of Raiden kind of looking back, being like, nobody here is replaceable, meaning that they need the 586 to fight this battle for them. But they're not going to be mad if you die. Just saying. So then we have the mess hall scene, which at this point, Sheen is not eating, right? Sheen doesn't even touch his food. If you look at the plates, Sheen is not touching his food. So he's not eating. We don't think he's sleeping well. He's not sleeping well. We're going to talk about this. I do think that Sheen, like Lena, is fearless. No fear. Doesn't care if he dies or not, right? Not a fear bone in him at all. He does have resolve. He has resolve that he's going to go to the battlefield and keep fighting the Legion. So he's very much like Lena in that regard. And then that's about it. So we're going to talk about Sheen, but he does have those things. He's fearless and has a lot of resolve, just like Lena. But then from there, we start to see some differences. Like, I'm sure Lena is eating 3 square meals a day. The red beans and rice didn't miss her, right? She is keeping herself healthy and in check to fight this battle. Sheen is not eating. I don't think he's sleeping. And Frederica's like, what's wrong with you? Why are you being weird? And he's like, nothing is wrong. And Theo's like, are you still tired? Which makes you assume that he looks like he's tired. And they're like, are the noises bothering you? Did you go overwhelmed at the end? You didn't really listen to us and you were doing things kind of different than we normally do. And Frederica's like, you guys weren't fighting like you usually do. Imagine that. She's like, I synchronized with you and you didn't respond at all. Now he kind of questions, he's like, synchronized? And I'm like, yeah. So she basically is telling us that her family's bloodline have the power like the Para-Raid, which is what we found out. Sheen's bloodline, the Nosens, have that ability to psychically link with one another. And she can do that like without the Para-Raid. She doesn't have to have the implant behind her. So I feel like Sheen has that ability, but maybe doesn't realize it, that he has the capability to level that she does. Because I think he was trying to like sync up with Lena back on the battlefield, and it just was only for a second. Then he was like, oh, right. And she's like, you didn't respond at all. And he's like, synchronized. And she's like, you didn't notice I was trying to get a hold of you? And she's like, you should all get some rest, especially Sheen. She's like, all of you need to rest before we go out and do anything else. She's like, you know, at the bottom of your hearts, you're all exhausted. I'm glad Frederica says this. And he's like, at a time like this, well, that's going to be hard. And so, yeah, let's look on here. There's like maybe, but it looks like a guy. No, there are no ladies in this room. No lady soldiers. None whatsoever. There was a lady that was the lady that helped get Fido back. She exists. But other than her, there is like no lady bones in this mess hall. And they're like, especially you're 86, you'll be given special consideration. And then Karina is like, I don't want that. She's like, I don't want special consideration. I don't want to be treated differently out of pity. And my issue with them as a group is I do get what they're saying, that they don't want pity, right? And Sheen's going to have this big moment later on with Wenzel, which I was kind of had mixed feelings about. They don't want pity, right? And I do agree. When they first came to the Federacy, that's all they were getting was pity. Was the series was like, oh, save the 86 and all this and blah, blah, blah. And it kind of goes back to Lena, who Wenzel is being compared to a lot in this episode, where they're like, we don't want to be pitied by you all. We want to be treated as equals on the battlefield like you all are, et cetera, et cetera. With Sheen, I worry about something different. But I get Karina saying this, and everybody just kind of like looks. And the thing about it is that kind of gets brought up here. You see the faces of the people in the front row of the mess hall here kind of change and look kind of aggravated in that moment of being like, we don't want to pity you. Like, we're mad you're here. We're mad you're here, and we're mad that you all are getting involved in this. Like, it doesn't feel like pity. So there's this weird tension in the air where everybody's like, we don't really want to pity you at all. And then we see like their eyes looking back at them, the 86. And she's like, I prefer to be looked at that way. She's like, I do respect Karina for being like, look, if you all hate us, hate us. Don't just try to put on this false show of pity for us. Like, tell it like it is. Tell us what you feel, right? Like, don't try to be, like they told Lena at the beginning of the series, like don't put this martyrdom and be like Oprah when you really don't like us. Like, just be honest. The thing about it is, Lena was compassionate, she just was speaking from a place of privilege. And these guys, I don't think they really don't like them, but they're just putting on an act for their superiors. And I like that Karina calls it out. And Theo's like, yeah, well, we got lucky this time. Theo like breaking the fourth wall, but the whole base could be blown up. And we see that one compound that's just completely destroyed. So I do like the visual of that. And then everyone's on edge. I really do like when they show the food having been just cleaned out, like the buffet is just like wrecked, like they went to town on it. And that juxtaposition of Theo saying everyone's on edge, like everyone's stress eating. They're just eating, just getting ready for whatever happens. And it's all kind of like chaos. I liked that symbolism. That was really cool. I thought that was good. It could take 2 months to repair the Morpho, and we shouldn't expect any attacks until then. But I like Theo's like, but that estimate's based off of 5 seconds of footage. And I'm like, yes, Theo, that's great that you're pointing out in some shady foreign country and some weird psychic power. I love that Theo just kind of throws shade at Sheen's ability, being like, yeah, it's some shady foreign country and this weird psychic power over here. I love it. I love that Theo throws some like casual shade at Sheen, and he's like, right here in front of my uneaten food. I thought that was really good. I was like, yes, awesome. They feel like can't trust it. And yeah, Theo brings up a good point. He's like, all this stuff is kind of weird and foreign. And so, a lot of times when there's something unknown that you're faced with, the natural reaction to the unknown is hatred and fear. And that's kind of what's happening. And I think Theo is smart to call that out. And Karina's like, but Sheen knows the truth. They didn't believe it until they heard that voice. She's like, yeah. And there's been no major trouble or confusion. I like this also. Again, the symbolism was a lot more subtle in this episode, which I really liked. I was like, yes. And it's more ambiguous, and I like that. I'm like, yes, more of that. So like there's a shot of the table, and the table they're all eating and everything seems normal. And under it you see the guy's leg bouncing up and down like he's just really antsy about it. That kind of stuff is cool. Right? I like that. I like those little details where everybody's on edge and it's just showing little ways in which it is. Yeah. And I like the idea that they kind of compare the two militaries, saying, well, the Republic soldiers would turn tail and run because they have no sense of like staying on the battlefield. The Confederacy is going to stay and fight the fight. And that's when Theo says, I wonder if the major's still alive. And he says that with such sincerity. Like, you know, he's thinking everybody's thinking it. Frederica's like, Major? What major? And then Anju says, Theo. And I'm assuming they're saying, you know, don't bring up the major because we don't want the Confederacy to know that we were close with one of the handlers from the Republic. We don't want them to know that, so don't bring her up, right? Because Frederica's like, who are you talking about? And Anju's like, oh, and he's like, oh. And then Karina says, well, she wouldn't run. Yeah, she would stay and fight. Like, I like that Theo's concerned and Karina actually stands up for Lena. I was like, wait, what? Like, I will give Karina credit. She actually stood up for Lena and was like, she wouldn't run away. And you could say she's saying it out of like spite, being like, she wouldn't run. She's too stupid to do that. Like, you know, but I was like, okay, Karina, cool. And then Raiden's like, Karina, no, or Anju says it. And then they all kind of look around and then they look over to Sheen and Sheen's like, you know, just sitting there. And he's like, what? And Theo's like, don't tell me he doesn't realize it. Yeah. And Anju's like, is there anything you do about the Morpho? So I was curious that he doesn't realize it. I didn't know if Theo was meaning that they all miss her and they're all trying to bring her up and Sheen is just oblivious, or if it's the fact that they, you know, don't want to mention her because they don't want Sheen to feel bad if she's dead, or I didn't really understand the meaning of what Theo meant by that line, that he didn't want. I thought Anju was trying to get Karina and Theo to stop talking because they didn't want the others in the mess hall to hear about the major and get suspicious that they were, you know, because we find out very quickly they don't like Sand Republic at all. They're leaving them out of this whole thing. And I mean, rightfully so based on their actions, but that part was kind of curious to me, like why they weren't bringing it up to Sheen. If anything, Sheen needs Lena. I'm sorry, but Lena, that whole fix it fic where it's like you can fix him. Lena, you need to come in here and do some repairs because Sheen is a bit of a fixer-upper at this point. I'm like, girl, he needs some help real bad. And they're like, we have 2 months to come up with a plan. And even if we do, it probably won't be a good one. It's probably it'll be us again. Yeah. I like that they already know. They're like, they're going to send us because who else is going to do it? We're used to suicide missions. What's one more, right? Probably. And they're like, are you okay with that? And they're like, I told you, yeah. And all Sheen has done is drink his coffee. The bitter black coffee. That's all he's drank. So this episode's called I Won't Forget, right? So then we have this guy, this soldier there that's getting the letter from the sister saying, you want me to give it to him again? It says there's no answer. Can I take a look at it? And she says, yes. And so he opens up the letter, looks at it, and he kind of has this open mouth reaction and then gets kind of mad about it and says it's easier to blame it on someone else. So we don't exactly see who this person is, but they put the letter back in and they says, be careful. Oh, it's Marcel, isn't it? Yeah, it's Marcel. And he says, I'll make sure he gets it. So the letters are kind of like, if I were Marcel, I kind of am a little bit pissed at Marcel because it's really cruel to send those to Sheen, first of all. Because Sheen killing Eugene, I mean, he wasn't going to live. And him killing him and putting him out of his misery, quote unquote, the superior officer in the situation was like, I mean, it's probably going to happen anyway. So you having the courage to do that says something. But it kind of makes me mad about Marcel and kind of pissed off with his character because, first of all, getting the letter to him that said that directly, I was expecting the letter that he had opened in that episode. I was expecting that letter to be heartfelt and like something from Frederica that was like, here's a picture of you guys and here's all this and look at this moment and blah, blah, blah. And of course, Sheen, even if he had that photo, wouldn't send it to the sister because Sheen's not going to do that. I wonder if Frederica's ever going to... If Frederica finds out about the letters coming from Eugene's sister, Nina, I wonder if Frederica will give Nina the picture of Sheen and Eugene, and she'll be like, oh, I was so wrong about him. And But the thing that pisses me off about Marcel is him saying, well, it's easier to blame it on someone else. He's talking about just blaming Sheen for it all. It wasn't Sheen's fault that Eugene suffered a mortal wound that was going to kill him. It's not Sheen's fault for that. Yeah, Sheen pulled the trigger and ended his life, but he was going to die anyway. I don't think there was any way he was going to live. So it pisses me off that Marcel was like, yeah, I'm going to keep taking this little girl's frustration in her little letters. And if a good person would have taken those letters and burnt them, and been like, yeah, I gave it to him. Because what she's doing is clearly just venting her anger at losing her brother. She needs an outlet. So the chances of her ever seeing Sheen are null and void, pretty much. So if she needs to vent her frustration, she's writing these letters. If I was Marcel, I would just throw away the letter. And then be like, yep, I delivered it to him. She's never going to know. And then, one, you're not putting Sheen through a more emotional trauma than is necessary, and two, the girl gets the satisfaction that she's vented her frustration and anger on this person, and if it helps her get through it, whatever. But instead of recommending therapy to her and then tossing the letter aside, instead he enables it. He takes it and goes, yeah, I'll give it to him. Oh, that pisses me off. I'm like, Marcel. And I'm sure that's what his character's supposed to do, is make us mad in this moment. But he gets the letter. And in the thing, the letter they got said, why did you kill my brother? Give him back. And that's why he had the look on his face like, yes, I did kill your brother. And I'm not giving him back. Oh, and then he sees her. This whole sequence here where she's like, why did you abandon him? Why didn't you save my brother? And Sheen's got a lot of problems, right? She's like, you killed him, right? And he's like, yes. She's like, I was waiting for him to come back. So then we see, yeah, the Legion coming at him. And you knew I was waiting. Oh, and seeing her eye through the window as it breaks. Oh, that's really good. She's like, you knew I was waiting. Why should you be the one to survive? And he's like, and then she's like, you have no one waiting for your return. Well, and here's the thing. He does. He could. Lena. I think he realizes that in the last moment, and that's why he hears her voice. He's like, oh shit, do I like Lena? Am I wanting her to be the one? So he does not see anything or anyone beyond the war. He does not, right? He doesn't see any purpose in living past this battle because he doesn't think he has anybody to come home to, which I'm like, you have your friends, you have Raiden in them, but you think they're going to die too, so there's that. But he also has a massive amount of survivor's guilt, right? The thing that's so frustrating is that I feel like in some sense Lena has some survivor's guilt as well, having to live through and watch all these people around her die, and she doesn't really do anything. She can't do anything about it, right? So Lena has this survivor's guilt as well. And, if you think about it, what purpose does Lena really have beyond the war? She's not marrying any of these Albans, so she's not settling down. She's not rising the ranks. Her uncle put a stop to that. So she doesn't really, she doesn't like the country that she's living in. So you have two characters that both are suffering from survivor's guilt. They're both natural born leaders. They both don't really have a purpose beyond this battle at the moment. But the big difference is that Lena does not treat it like a death wish. She's like, okay, I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to survive. And I'm going to survive to live to see another day. And I'm going to be a survivor for all. Whereas Sheen, he's been this reaper for all. But his survival that he has is to die on the battlefield. He does not think that there's really a point in living to see another day at this junction, except to see things through. He doesn't see anything beyond that. And his mental state is a problem. I feel like Lena's mental state is in a much better place. And, she's when that ghostly version of Eugene's sister is like, you have no one waiting for your return. And he's like, that's right. He has the blood streaming down his face. He's like, I don't have a family. I don't have a brother anymore. Who do I have waiting on me? And he's like, and they said, if you died instead of him, then, and that's when he hears Lena say, I won't forget. And he remembers that voice. Because it's like, and you see the fireworks from that night back then. And he's like, Major. And he's about to open up that present. He stops for a second because the General Richard wants to speak with him. And he puts it on the table. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that he turns back to look at the earpiece that was taken out, and then later we see him talking and you see the other ear. So yeah, I'm like, the romantic in me wants to see Sheen and Lena get together because he needs a Lena at this point. He needs Lena to help him have some purpose, have some like meaning to his life, because like girl seems like she's pretty well adjusted. He is not at all. Like, he's in a very bad place. And the thing that's so frustrating is that Raiden and the others know something is up and something's wrong, but because Sheen doesn't communicate with any of them and they don't press it, I feel like Raiden tries to press it, but Sheen's like, no, I don't want to talk about it. And then Raiden's like, fine, and lets it go. I feel like he needs Lena to come in, and Lena like sits on his bed and she's like, I'm not leaving till you talk to me. That's what needs to happen, right? And none of his other comrades are doing that. So we need Lena to be in there being like, no, let's talk. Like, Frederica tries to do that a little bit, but then what do we do? So then, okay, I do want to say one thing. He goes to this office and General Richard is the older guy there. And he's like, you can hear the Legion's voices and know where they are. And Sheen's like, yep. He's like, is that correct? And he's like, yes, sir. And he's like, where are they? And so what I was waiting for is him just to like encompass the whole map, but that could have been too much. That could have been too cliche. So instead he goes there and goes on the board and starts laying out where they are based on, I like that we get the other ear, not the ear with the clip, but the other ear to, based on where they are, right? As he's going through and detailing it. And then he shows, and then he says, yeah, and he's about to do Liberty for the Republic of San Magnolia, and he says, oh, no, forget the Republic. Uh-huh. And see, this is the thing. This is the thing. Like, again, the 86 talked at the beginning about how they weren't going to be like the Republic, and the Republic leaving everybody out, but all the other countries are leaving them out, and it's interesting. I'm not saying that San Magnolia deserves to be saved. Like, last episode, I was like, let him go. But I think it's interesting that Sheen and the others are seeing that, the Federacy that's like, oh, welcome 86, we love you, and all this. They're just like, F them people. Right? They're like, we're not even going to bother with the Republic. We're not going to bother with them. Screw them. It's interesting, right? And I'm sure there's a lot of historical examples you could pull up with World War I, World War II that kind of tie back to this idea of exclusion and all of that. I'm just saying. He's like, yep, you have that ability. You're more than suited for this operation. And he's like, it's quite simple. Our three nations will launch a full assault as a decoy. And then he looks down at his hand there, right? Almost as if he's wondering, did I do the right thing pointing out where all those forces were, except I wasn't allowed to point out the Republic. My thing is, if Lena had been able to be there at the table, Lena would have been like, hey, my country's shit, but shouldn't we all try to survive together as a front? I think she would have said something like that, but they're going to lure the enemy's main forces to their respective fronts and then withdraw. And a special assault force will make an aerial entry into the territory, which will be much less defended. And that's when Winsel's like, oh, that's a suicide mission. My thing is, they're like, this is the part that just got me. And I was like, oh my God, here we go. is that the 15 members, almost like the number that was, in the, when Lena got assigned as handler, you're going to be a special offensive. Why? You're going to be the vanguard of the largest joint operation in history. And I like that it's just like the upside down. It's like, does this seem like deja vu? It should seem like deja vu. And when he said that you're going to be the edge of the spear that pierces the Legion's defenses, you're going to be the spearhead. And Sheen's like, give it your all. I was like, wow, we could not be more on the nose, could we? Mm-mm. And it's just funny because they're being treated the same way. It's the same old song and dance. This country seems like it's going to be great, sunshine and roses. You get to work with us in the army, which you didn't get to do back when you were in San Magnolia. But surprise, we don't want to sacrifice our troops to an aerial assault that could get them all killed. Instead, we're going to take you 5 and 10 randos that are qualified, and we're going to just sacrifice you guys. Hope you're happy. It's the same thing. It's Spearhead. It's the same thing. This is 2.0. This is the battle against Rey and the Legion, only on an amped up scale, except instead of Rey that we have to save, it's now Kiri that we're supposed to save. It's the same damn thing. Over again. Except now we're going to be in the air with cooler mech gear than the old juggernauts that were falling apart. Right? So, hell, if the Juggernauts could defeat Rey's forces, if 5 Juggernauts could defeat Rey's forces, I think we're fine. Well, the Morphos are a bigger problem, so that's, I'm being a little facetious there. And then that's when Winsel's like, that's a suicide mission and really dumb. And they're like, and then when he says, why them? And we don't hear the general say, because they're 86. And that's when Sheen has the little flashback. I don't think that's what he's saying. It's what he means. And we go there. Now, here's my only issue with this whole scene. Because obviously the parallels are right in front of us. They are there. They are loud and clear. The moment they said, the edge of a spear, spearhead. I was like, we got it, right? The thing is, I wish they would have just stopped here. When she says, why them? I wish we could have got the flash of Daya saying, because we're 86. That's what he says. He's not saying it, but that's what he means. But I wish that had just been that, because that's all we needed. We already understand the parallel and we get it. But they kept it going a little bit more, and it came across a little bit cheesy, where he's like, we can't assign anybody with a family to this insane mission, huh? That's kind of what they said earlier when they said we need the people that are most likely to succeed, but least likely to be missed. They'll be least likely to be missed because they don't have a family. So we didn't need Daya like spelling it out for us here. The 86 aren't welcome no matter where they go. We just had a sign at the beginning of the episode say 86 go away, which means essentially that. And they're like, she's getting mad. She can't change it. Now that part there, yeah, she's acting like Lena, which is a nice comparison. I like it, right? And then I can hear the voices of the Legion all the way to the Republic's capital. Yeah, and you see that little thumbprint. I do like it's a thumbprint on the screen, right? And it's just that print there, like, did the white pigs all die? They're on their way to hell. Ha ha ha. If hell exists, it's all the same when you're dead. Die as scum or die with pride. And they're like, we all died with pride. It's how you live that's important, right? And then I did like them all turning into their little respective pieces of metal there. And then that's when they say, like, right up to the very end, only because of you did we get to die with pride, because you're our Reaper. It's a lot of responsibility. Again, you have Sheen and Lena, who both bear the responsibility of being the leader of their people, Lena as a handler and Sheen as a Reaper. So they both have this level of responsibility. Sheen's just not handling it well, right? In comparison. And then they all like become these little chunks of metal behind him. I do really think Sheen looks amazing in that side profile. He looks great. He looks very mature. He looks great in that side profile. And that's when he says, I'm always left behind. And I want to feel for Sheen, But then I'm like, bitch, you need to talk to your comrades. I'm like, you still have you have 4 other teammates who care about you. You need to talk to them. I'm like, I want to feel bad for him, but then I'm like, Sheen, you read all these books, like, say something to them, you know? If you're feeling bad about being left behind, talk to them. Share that. They would gladly listen to you, but he won't do that. And then Lena, who says that she's not going to leave him behind. Like, she breaks through that wall and gets him, is like, I'm not going to let you die and I'm not going to leave you behind. Like, I'm all about this romance. My only thing is, I wish we had more of it throughout. I wish we had more moments like this throughout the season to kind of help amp up and lead up to it, right? But she's like, I wanted you to live longer than we did. And she's like, well, don't leave me behind. I like that he's like, that was my wish. It's like, he doesn't want her to get hurt. And she's like, bitch, we're in the middle of a war. You can't tell me that. So I just want more of this between the two of them. I really do. And we get like a 30-second scene. And the moment they showed that field of poppy fields, and I'm like, okay, the OP, they're going to meet on some poppy field and see each other. It's going to happen. And it's going to be really nice. But I wish the OP hadn't shown us that, because now it's expected. And I'm like, it's going to happen, you know. And then he says goodbye. Like, he accepts in that moment that they're all going to die. He's never going to see her again. I'm like, I can't wait for him to be proven wrong. Sheen has been proven wrong time and time again in this series. I can't wait for it to happen again. And they're like, well, if you've done it once, you can do it again. Somebody has to do it. The Federacy. And here's the thing. So it's like, well, you've done it. You've done one suicide mission. What's another one? Which is kind of like, well, you're sounding exactly like Sam Magnolia. But here was the kicker. They're like, the Federacy saved you from the battlefield. If you've come back to it, then it means you're willing to do this. And war is a soldier's job. I'm like, oh, that's how we're justifying it. Uh-huh. Yeah. They're like, you chose this, right? That is a very, I do share in Winsel's frustration, where she's like, bitch, that is an excuse to scapegoat someone. Saying that is an excuse to scapegoat somebody. She's like, all they've known is war. Like, put them somewhere else. She's like, all they've known is war, and that's all they know to hold on to. So of course they're going to come back to the battlefield. Of course they are. She's like, she's a soldier and knows that, right? But I think Winsel's a good example where she's like, look, all I know is war. So yeah, I came back to the battlefield, but am I on the front lines? No, I'm doing research here and doing what I'm good at. But then of course you could argue, well, what we're good at is going on these suicide missions. But I feel like her thing was, if you want to be on the battlefield, go do this other thing, right? But then Sheen argues that's not our specialty and this is it. And what's funny here is he says war is a soldier's job and dying in battle is part of the job, but yet you don't want to sacrifice any of your people because then it won't look good. So there's like such shades of hypocrisy in that whole deal. And I'm like, funny that. And Sheen just kind of like smiles, being like, Sheen's just so used to the hypocrisy at this point that he's like, wow, everywhere's the same, huh? We just don't have a place, huh? See how it is, huh? And they just understand it. And I get why Sheen yells at Winsel, but she is trying, to like stand up for them. And they keep saying, don't pity us. And she's like, well, but you bitches aren't standing up for yourselves. So somebody has to. That is one thing, is that the 86, they're all like, don't pity us. But also, we're kind of all suicidal and have lots of issues. And I'm like, I feel like sometimes Winsel and Lena are trying to stand up for them and be like, hey, if you're not going to advocate for yourself, somebody's trying to advocate for you. And, and they aren't acknowledging that. So I do feel Winsel's frustration. I do feel bad for her because she's trying to like keep them safe, to say you deserve better and you're not advocating for yourself. And then Sheen gets kind of mad and he's like, you want us to cease being who we are, and for the sake of your pity and your sense of justice, is that right? And I'm like, if I was Winsel, I would have said no, but you guys being a bunch of suicidal maniacs is stupid. If if I was Winslow, I would have turned around and been like, oh, so who you are a bunch of suicidal idiots? Okay, cool. Did you ever think that maybe there's more to life than that? Do you think you should contemplate that? Maybe? Like, I feel like it's trying to say, like, it's cool to be suicidal and go into battle, you know, for whatever reason, when it's not really. But, you know, and if I were Winslow, I'd been like, do you even know who you are? Because I don't think you have a good sense of that. But he's like, I'm grateful you saved me, but that does not give you the right to pity me. And I'm kind of like, I don't think she's totally pitying you. I think she's pitying your inept sense of purpose. It doesn't give you the right to tell me not to fight. And that part does make sense. Or run from the battle and make someone else fight for me. That part does make sense. It's such a complicated scene because on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, I get that Sheen's like, look, don't try to scapegoat someone else to fight for us because then you're no different than what everyone else is doing. And he's like, and I want to like you and give you respect and treat you better than that. But on the other end, she does have a fair point in saying you all shouldn't just want to jump into a suicidal mission the first chance you get. You should maybe have other ambitions. So it's complicated, right? He's like, I refuse to be like the Republic or turn my eyes from the war until the day the end comes. And then they kind of like stop that second, right? When the car goes by. Yeah. And then he gets out, right? And he says there may be a time lag that causes the mission to fail, so I'm taking direct command of the assault team. And if I were Winslow, I'd been like, you are not in a good mental state to do that, but okay. So meanwhile, this was the part that got me. I thought it was going to be in that last scene, but I don't know. Occasionally this series does things like you're going to give these people crazy names for their ethnicities like Onyx and Jade and Rubinia or something, but all it says for the only explanation of like the fact that they can read minds and stuff is just to put psychics. In big bold letters. I would have gave it like a cool name or something. Been like what is his other ethnicity? It's like Pyrope or something. Be like Pyropes. Like the Pyrope family or that ethnicity that bloodline have the ability. And my dogs are gonna go crazy, of course. It's that time of the evening. But I would have been like Pyrope there and explained that had something to do with their bloodline. But psychics, sure. Anyway, it's like we couldn't keep quiet about it any longer. Well, Sheen definitely was going to say something about it regardless. They're like, sorry for making you do the hard job, General. It's a division commander's responsibility. Do you think he'll be able to come back even alone? What's interesting is they kind of want Sheen to live because they want to keep using his ability, which of course, you know, that was kind of brought up between him and Raiden. And they're like, oh no, he would be furious if one of their friends was sent on a mission like that. They'll smirk and say it's an appropriate mission for the 86. And then we have that card. We see Sheen's opened up that card, right? And see the red behind him? Yep. And so then he says, if you're a match for a monster, that means you're a monster yourself. And we see Sheen holding the Juggernaut piece that says Ray. I hate when Sheen smiles like that. I hate it because he's just like, yeah, if death is so attractive, then why don't we let them have it? And it's not that that's the part that sucks so much. It's like, it's not that it's attractive to them. It's just they don't know anything else. And they don't have any other sense of purpose or belonging outside of that. It's been completely stripped away from them, which sucks. But I hate when Sheen smiles about that sort of thing. Because I'm like, you shouldn't be smiling about that, Sheen. That's not good. You should not be celebrating the fact that you're going to your death. Like, he thinks everyone wants him to die. So he's like, I'll give them what they want. And then we see the other picture. And it looks like it's of a Juggernaut or whatever. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5 of them all dead around it. Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that sucks. And it's going to like where they're going, where the Morpho is. Meanwhile, I do really like this moment where they're doing the press conference and it shows Bernhold and them. And as soon as like the presentation is done showing like that they're going to their death, like everybody gets up and leaves out of the room pissed off except for the 5. And they're all just mad because they're all going to their deaths. And I like that the one guy, he says, Commander, I appreciate you not abandoning us, but I can't watch kids the age of mine and my relatives' children going off to die. And then he shakes his head and he's like, if you change your mind, that's fine. Tell us to go without you. And Sheen's like, welp. And then Bernholtz says, I like what Bernholtz says here when he stands up. Or no, he gets out. I guess that's it. Yeah. And so Raiden, he's like, well, it's a bad enough they're saying that. They're like, well, we're used to it. Ha, ha, ha. And they're like, if we run now, we're no different from the white pigs. Yep. And they're like, oh, you snapped at Winslow too, right? We were chosen for the most dangerous part because we're 86. And we're going because we're 86. And then Theo says, but I feel kind of lonely. Yep, because Lena's not there with them. Yeah. I hate that mentality. They think that this is all that they have for them because of them being oppressed so much. And then they talk about eating dinner, but Sheen's like not ate anything since they've been here. So, you know, it sucks. I hate that none of them know about the letters he's been receiving. Okay. So, all right. There is a little bit of connection here. I wondered last episode about the chairs and the room with the chairs all gathered and Frederica being away from them. Here you have all the chairs gathered where they're watching the presentation and they're all like lined up a certain way. So I wonder if there's like a symbolism with that or if it's just an aesthetic thing. I don't know. Anyway, we cut to the very end and we see that we see San Magnolia has just been ravaged and we see that stupid sign again. And then the 86, there's 86 dead on the ground. I love the shot of the statue with like the mouth and the eyes blown off of it. That's so cool. I love that. Yes. And then Lena's room demolished, except for that little box with all the tags. Yep. So yeah, it says next episode is a special visual commentary episode. I don't think that's right. I will look into that and see what that's about. But yeah, oh my gosh, what an episode. I've talked for nearly an hour and a half. I liked this episode a lot. Again, this series is good, and there's parts where I think it could just be better, and I wish it was, but I really like it so far. After episode 16, I'm like, I really liked episodes 1 through 9, and then 10 through 14 were, and then 15 was okay, and then 16 and this episode have been good. So, yay. I feel like if we bookend with really solid episodes, that'll be nice. So, in any case, I am curious to hear your thoughts down below. Please, no novel spoilers. I know I'm going to be reading novels 1 through 3 when this is over, so don't worry. I'm going to be able to check in with y'all to tell you what I found out. But in any case, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back very soon with more 86.